Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. All right, everybody, and welcome back. I am joined by Frankie Hart. Everyone loves the Frankie Hart Show. Frankie, we were just talking before. You're like, are you getting that cold weather? I'm like, Frankie, wait a minute. You're in Florida. What do you mean cold weather?
My students tease me all the time because this is cold for me. Although I grew up in New York, so I just said I really acclimated to the Florida weather. But my nephew is at University of Buffalo, and I grew up in Buffalo, and so he's experiencing that big snowstorm that they just had.
That was like 6 feet of snow. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that your family's okay because
Oh
that's
yeah.
a lot of snow. So, all right. So you were teaching us some great stuff on the last show. Can you just give us a kind of a little review and bring us up to date? Because I still got questions about how to, and a bunch of
Beautiful.
things.
Yeah, I'd love to, Casey. I made a few notes so we could catch people up who are jumping in this podcast.
Great idea.
So what we were talking about for the listeners out there is just really kind of nuts and bolts, foundational ways to begin a meditation practice. And we were talking about how long should we practice? And, one of the great things that we discussed, Casey, is that even though I recommend 15 to 20 minutes a day, to start, you could start with even 1 to 2 minutes of quieting the mind, especially if you're a very busy person or a person who's nervous about meditating, difficult to slow down. Just experiment with really short segments. And we'll talk about how to do that later in the podcast.
Okay.
We talked about how often to practice every day. Every day is wonderful. My teacher, my Qigong master, would say on your birthday, he would give you a birthday card. It said, happy birthday, practice. Forget your age, just practice. And then on Christmas, he'd send a card that would say, be happy, practice.
Practice.
So the idea is that the practice becomes like brushing our teeth or flossing or, our daily hygiene, that we feel better when we do it. So in the beginning, we're creating a habit, but once we get going, we notice when we don't have it, and we want to do that,
Gotcha. Yeah, you found that the morning works for you, right?
I did, yeah. Like for me, the morning right now is really beautiful I do a standing meditation, and then usually in the evenings I'll do a quiet meditation, a seated or reclining meditation.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's right. And we were talking about what time of day. So that's perfect, Casey. Another thing we talked about is, how do I know if it's working, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what am I doing? Am I making any progress?
Yeah,
So
your student said something about like that story you were telling us about your student. It was kind of funny.
Yes, exactly. So a few ideas. One, do I feel calmer? Do I just feel a feeling of relief? Like, I had this flurry of activity, or maybe I felt a little overwhelmed from the day, or even a little emotionally strained. After the practice, do I just feel a little bit calmer, a little feeling of relief? And then there's a term that I liked very much, and that's embodiment. Do I feel in my body even just a little bit more, even just a little bit more? Stress and both internal stress and external stress tends to pull us out of living in our body. I forget who the author is. There's a beautiful line. He said, I had a dear friend, he lived a small distance from his body. Right? And when we live a small distance or a great distance from our body is not very happy, right? So we have stresses, and these show up as mental confusion. It can show up as poor sleep. It can show up as aches and pains in the body, organ trouble. So when we start to feel embodied, like just as simple as, oh, I really feel myself sitting in the chair, or I feel this kind of groundedness. These are really beautiful qualities to have, right?
Okay.
So in the beginning, these are things we're looking for, simple things. I feel my body. I feel my breath. I don't feel pulled in so many directions.
Mm-hmm.
I feel a calmness, a clarity of mind.
And in the mind, you're feeling that too, where
Yes,
you're able to quiet the monkey brain, as you say, every once,
yes,
excuse me, a little bit more than s- before you started meditation.
absolutely. So sometimes in life, when you feel overwhelmed by things, you can slowly come into some meditation practice, and you'll realize that the priorities start to bubble up, like you start to see more clearly, like this is not as important as that. I'm going to focus here. This can wait. I have a path now, or I'm not ready yet to make a decision. You don't feel that urgency, right? When we're not clear on what we want and the outer world is pushing us to respond now, right? We feel an inner sense of urgency with an inner sense of conflict.
Mm.
When we know what we want and there's a sense of urgency, we just go. The nervous system goes, right? Like your dog runs out in the street, you just run after the dog. There's no conflict, you just go. But when we don't know what we want, when we have conflict, then we have this external pressure, you have to know now, you have to decide now, it actually is not good for our nervous system. So taking some moments, some time, even when you feel you don't have time, to quiet down, it can actually help the mind clarify, and you can start to cut through what's really important. And ideas will come to you, solutions will come.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, can you see me, Casey? My
Yeah,
screen froze for
you're
a moment,
frozen right now, but
but you can hear me?
I can hear you perfectly, but you are frozen.
Beautiful. Okay.
So we'll just wait
Okay.
for you to,
Well,
to unfreeze. But
there I am.
oh, there you
There
go.
you are.
Okay.
Beautiful. Well, we were talking about calming down and slowing down.
Yeah.
Yes, we
Right.
did.
Okay. Hmm.
And then the only other thing I think that we talked about in terms of these nuts and bolts is what to wear
Right.
and where to practice.
Yeah.
So comfortable clothing. You don't want to feel cold. If you are meditating for a longer period of time, your body temperature does drop.
Oh.
So you want to, especially now that it's winter, you want your feet warm. So if your feet are on a cold floor and you're sitting in a chair, do have socks or some carpet or something under the feet or under a cold chair for your sitting bones. And then no direct breeze on the body. So here in Florida, everyone lives with a lot of air conditioning. And I'm always advising people not to practice their meditation right in front of an air conditioner that's blowing cold air, particularly on your neck and shoulders.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, there are acupressure points back there that you want to stay warm.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right.
And then someplace that's quiet if you can, and at least someplace that you won't be jolted, right? So even if the space is not quiet necessarily in your house, but you can close the door, that's, those sounds are outside sounds, and no one's going to walk in to startle you. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, can I ask you about maybe about eating? Can
Yes.
I eat beforehand? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, beautiful. When you meditate, you don't want to have a large meal right before you meditate.
Oh,
All right. So, in general, for yoga practice, for a large meal, we recommend 2 hours. Now, there's a very different, and this is where it's so beautiful, Casey, to understand the spectrum of meditation. We might be doing a deep meditation with strong breath practices called pranayama. Now, what I mean by strong is that you're working with the diaphragm in a way that is extending the breath, elongating the breath, deepening the breath. In those practices, even though we approach it very gently, you don't want to practice right away. Like 2 hours after eating is very important. But maybe you've just had a smaller meal, or maybe you're just doing a 1 or 2 minute meditation, right?
yeah.
So even if you've just had a large meal and something stressful happens and you think, maybe it wouldn't be so good if I respond right now the way I'm feeling,
Yeah.
to just take a window of a pause and for 1 minute, listen to your breath.
Hmm.
Do you see? You
Yeah.
can do that at any time, at
Okay.
any time. And that's the beauty of it. The deeper you go with the practice, the further you want to be from eating. But in terms of these touchstones that I want to encourage people to do regularly for themselves or to begin a practice, then you can really begin at any time.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you for that. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Frankie, can you talk to me about some different types of meditation?
Yes. Yes. I know last time we mentioned or I mentioned that I want people to not get caught up in a method, because what do we mean by a method? I love this term. Ram Dass used to use it in his talks a lot, the method, right? So the method is the key into the garden of meditation, right? So maybe I went this way, maybe you went that way, but we met in this meditation garden. In other words, we found the inner being of ourself, the quietness of our own being.
Okay.
The method is not important in other ways except that it works for you, right? So there's this talk where Ram Dass was talking about, it was back in the 60s or 70s, and he said everybody in the audience was, in their 20s and flower children, and there was a woman who was much older sitting in the front row, and she was dressed like more corporate, and she kept nodding her head, yes, 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 and afterwards he couldn't wait to meet her because she came on stage to greet him like many of the other listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And when she came up, she says, Ram Dass, what you're saying is true. And he said, how do you know? Because here he had done those experiments with LSD with Timothy Leary. Then he went to India. He spent years with a guru, and he's thinking, how does this woman know? How does she know what she knows? And she says, I crochet.
Crochet. All right.
I love that story. So when people are wanting to start a meditation practice, I always share that story because we find the lightness of it. And there can be this idea that meditation has to be dark and somber and dreary. And, I have to sit painfully in lotus position for hours. But really, it's not that at all. And so crochet then was her method.
Okay.
There are many methods, and I like to divide them in general in these categories. You can have a seated meditation. You can have a reclining meditation. You can meditate standing. You can meditate walking. And a beautiful example of a walking meditation is something called forest bathing. And this really comes from the Japanese culture, but there are places now in the States that are, adapting to this idea. Really beautiful places in nature, encouraging people to come and forest bathe. And what that simply means is to immerse yourself in nature consciously. So if I'm walking in nature, and instead of walking in nature, but still being at work in my mind, right? You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. Of course.
To be walking in nature and to be mindful, to notice, to be aware, to start to feel you're a part of nature, right? So you hear the crunch of the leaves under your feet, you hear the breeze, and you see and touch, you feel the touch of the air on your skin or the leaves on your skin. This is forest bathing. And it's actually very simple because it's asking us to be mindful and present, right?
Yeah.
So walking meditations are really beautiful done in nature. And you see in that way, you have your eyes open. Even walking in your home, you would have your eyes open. But in other forms of meditation, you might have your eyes closed, certainly reclining or seated. And I like to share that very often, one of my teachers, people were always saying, can we do our meditations reclining today? And he would say, no. So you'll all fall asleep.
Could you fall asleep? Okay.
So that is one of the advantages of a seated meditation. We were talking before in a podcast, Casey, that in meditation and in our practice, as we quiet down, we're changing our vibration. So we're quieting the mind, but we're raising our inner vibration. For many people in this process, at some point, their mind is not used to being that quiet. And so they naturally slip into a sleep.
I see.
And that's beautiful because so many people take medication to sleep, right?
Yeah, totally.
So not to worry. But if you are doing a seated meditation, you have a little bit of gravity in your favor
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
stay awake, right? To
Yeah.
stay awake.
Can I ask one thing going back about the forest bathing?
Yes.
Say that you're walking, you're in nature, and you're being aware, you're feeling the crunch of the leaves and all that, and then you stop and you sit on a rock and you start to
Mhm,
do a meditation there. Are you still
mhm.
doing forest bathing because you are feeling the coldness of the rock? You are out in nature, but now does it change over to a different thing?
I love this. I love this question so much, Casey, because this is what I mean about method, right?
Uh-huh.
So then that, if I'm sitting, if say I stop to sit on a rock, and now I might still, sitting on that rock, be very immersed in what I'm experiencing around me in nature. Or I might have already started to go within. Maybe now I just notice my breath, So nature is still around me, but I've come to a very quiet place. And now I'm just with my breath. And I feel the rising and the falling of my breath. And then I feel a quieting and a quieting and a quieting. And then, we all have had those moments in time where we think, how long have I been here?
Right, right, yeah.
Right?
Hmm.
And so when you're meditating, you don't know if you've been there for a minute or a million years. Time is the one aspect that does not exist in meditation, right?
So that's
So
a
you're
good
in
sign if you don't
space.
know.
It's a beautiful sign. It's a beautiful sign.
Awesome.
And so that method of forest bathing might then slip naturally into a method of what we call pranayama or breath. And then you're in a next state, which is in the garden of meditation, where you're no longer using the method. So the method gets us there. And when we're there, it's quietness,
Okay,
right? It's not effort anymore.
got it. All right.
Yeah, beautiful.
Nice. And last thing I'll ask here is, do you encourage people to use music or no music?
Mm, it's an excellent question. So music has a couple things that work really well for us, rhythm and resonance. So if if I'm playing music that is very spacious, has an like a drone kind of rhythm, it can help my mind focus on that, right? If I'm playing music that's top 40, even if it's a relaxing song, my mind is going to be going into that, right?
Mhm.
So for meditation, you want this spacious, resonant, soft rhythm that doesn't compete with the rhythm of your breath. Does that make sense?
It does.
So, there's some beautiful people out there. Kamal, Kamal. He has some beautiful music with whale sounds. That again, if you're new to meditation, just the sitting in the silence of your space might feel intimidating. People really love that. And then Deuter, Deuter, has many albums. If you like Crystal Bowles, his Himalayan one album is beautiful. So this is very different than, say, listening to love songs,
Right, right.
you know,
Yeah.
because it's clear. It doesn't put any agenda, and that kind of spaciousness starts to bring you into a state of coherence, right? Which is what we're always looking for. Meditation, we could say, is being in a state of coherence with ourself and our surroundings. Um, but then there are some methods where they want no music at all, and that's also fine. So when you're in quietness, quietness is never completely quiet, is it?
No, it's not.
And certainly isn't in your home if you live with other people. And I'll tell you, Casey, even if you live alone, you can prepare everything, and the next thing you know, your neighbors are leaf blowing.
Of course, totally. A train comes by or something.
Yes, planes, trains, all of that. And that's perfect. That's what I tell people. That's perfect. So if I'm in a meditation in my class and somebody needs to get up to use the bathroom, or somebody needs to walk through the space or whatever, I would say later, that was a wonderful gift they gave us, because we got to be in our state of meditation, observing something, perhaps hearing something that we didn't have to get involved with.
Oh.
and we could maintain our equanimity, right? So in the beginning, people people try to meditate and they get very peaceful, and their spouse walks in or
Uh,
makes too much noise, and then we go, why are you making so much noise? And our
right.
spouse goes, I thought you were meditating. You seem really stressed.
Oh, that's guts to say something like that. Oh yeah.
But it's really true, right? Because and again, that's where we don't want to try too hard, right? And so if you're a person who those noises, those outer noises really challenge you, then I recommend checking out some of that beautiful music that I mentioned. Not too loud, just play in the background, because the sounds of nature or the sounds of our modern world are all just sounds, and they're all beautiful. You know, the sound of the air conditioning in the background or the heater in the background, that white noise sound, can also be a beautiful thing to focus on. You just kind of go into that white noise sound and everything else starts to quiet.
Judging by what you said, I think, is it accurate to say that the music should not have lyrics or people singing because would that throw you off? What do you think about that?
For deep meditation, I agree. Yes, it's like sometimes there will be vocalizations or harmonizations with a person's voice, but in general, singing will pull us. So, for instance, here's a great thing, like kirtan. Kirtan is chanting, and if ever any kirtan fans or anybody want to try that out there. Kirtan is just so beautiful and energizing, and it's called bhakti yoga. It's a form of devotional yoga, and you can get into sort of a meditative state and trance by doing this repeated chanting, which is using the breath very strongly. But it is in its own corner a little bit, and for instance, if I'm doing that kind of, if I'm listening, say, or doing chanting, it's very different than if I'm going into a quiet state of meditation. The quietness within the mind can still be there. And remember, this is a perfect time to touch on the earlier podcast where we were talking about the exhilarating side of letting go,
Yeah, that was a good
right?
one. Yeah.
Right. So Krishna Das is, if you're looking for some kirtan, I really recommend Krishna Das. And he has an album that he says, don't listen to this album and drive because you'll end up speeding. Like really, because he'll start chanting in a slow, melodic, rhythm that's very soothing. And then it just keeps, cooking, and the rhythm gets bigger and stronger. And people want to move and dance, and you'll go from driving a speed limit on the highway to going 95, not
Oh my
knowing,
God.
because your energy is going, right?
Right.
So it's a different kind of experience. So yeah, with like some of the whale sounds or vocalization sounds, some of those can be beautiful. I have a couple CDs of overtone singing in St. Mark's Cathedral there in New York, just transformative music. And as they're doing this overtone singing, and the cathedral, becomes the instrument. It's very beautiful and very
That's cool.
meditative.
Yeah.
But it's not someone singing about, some factual thing that pulls you in this way or that way.
I understand exactly what you're saying. You
Yeah.
explained it perfectly. Yeah. And would you suggest for a beginner, do you ever suggest to wear headphones with that soft music that you were talking with the
Mm,
whales, so
mm.
so you don't get distracted by the air conditioner or something like that? Do you ever encourage that?
That's another really great point. So the air conditioning, if you're listening to the air conditioning, that white noise can be actually a blessing to go into that sort of white noise. Headsets, I would say you have to deal with how comfortable you are. Some people will like that, like you might be very used to it, or I'm used to my AirPods a lot. Um, if that's comfortable for you, that's okay. Though I would say if you're starting to do deeper and deeper meditations and starting to really move the energy around, in the old days, my Qigong master would say, take off your watch, right? And people say, why? And it's because your bioelectrical signals and magnetic signals are shifting in meditation. So with an in-depth meditation practice, Casey, I would not wear headphones.
Great, thank you. Okay.
But if I'm just calmly listening to music or calmly just doing a brief meditation, then it's absolutely fine.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So again,
Totally.
here we're talking about the in-depthness of the work.
Yeah, because if you live in the city, you're hearing the horns and it could be abrupt, something like that. That's why I asked that question.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but Frankie, you set this up perfectly for part two because we are at the end right now. So let me give you the part three, but let me give you the floor here. Anything, and then maybe you could tell us where we're going with this next because you were
All
just
right.
about to come up to something, but it's a good stopping point here because we'll
It
be
is.
ready to go on the next one.
Beautiful. So, it's Thanksgiving coming up, right? In a couple of days. And so I wanted to end with just this idea of gratitude. David White, I'm going to share two little quotes here. David White says that gratitude is not a passive response to something that we have been given. Gratitude arises from paying attention, from being awake in the presence of everything that lives within, without, and beside us. That's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be present, to be mindful, to be awake. And when we are that way, gratitude comes naturally. Meditation comes naturally. Rumi has a poem where he says, the breezes at dawn, the breezes at dawn. Here's some nature bathing here, right? The breezes at dawn have secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. And here he's talking again about this staying awake, staying mindful, listening. When we do this, the state of being awake is when we feel most fully alive. It's not when we've got everything figured out. It's when we feel alive, and we feel alive with curiosity. We feel alive with wonder. We feel alive with passion for our life. And so when we focus ourselves in this way, meditation is either close at hand or already the state we are in.
Nice. Nice. I like that.
Yeah. So Casey, where we're going to go next, and this will be a great reveal for the readers and you, we're going to do a 7-part series on each of the chakras. And these chakras are energy centers within our body. And what I'd like to do is for each of the chakras, just touch for a moment on a meditation focus or theme for each of those. All right. Does that sound interesting?
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I think we learn a lot from that. That'd be cool.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, I love that.
All right, so Frankie, tell us where we can get a hold of you. And I really wish you the best Thanksgiving, you and your family and all your students and everyone over there. You're such a nice person. And I'm grateful that I get to do these shows with you and
Thank you,
learn
Casey.
from you. So
thank you. It's been a joy for me as well. I'm also filled with gratitude. And this is what I mean, like that when we move forward with what we're passionate about, we have these meetings, we have these opportunities to live a life that is meaningful to us. So thank you for being a part of my life in that way too, Casey.
oh, you're the best.
So Frankie Hart at Satya Life Yoga, SATYA Life, LIFE.com is our website. You can also text or call us at 863-802-9642 or write info@satyalife.com.
Awesome. Frankie, thank you so much. And once again, happy Thanksgiving. And everyone else, we will be right back. Stay right there. Thanks, Frankie.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.